The sun sank low behind the mesas, bleeding gold and crimson across the wide Arizona sky as the Apache Chief rode slowly toward the old ranch, his stallion's hooves stirring whispers of dust from the dry earth. He had fought wars, crossed deserts, and buried brothers beneath the endless sky, but nothing had prepared him for the stillness that awaited him here, where destiny wore the disguise of silence. The barn stood at the far end of the property, its red paint faded, its doors half open, as though inviting him to step into a dream. Rumors had reached his ears for days, rumors of 3 giant sisters who had appeared from nowhere, towering women of impossible beauty and strength, who spoke of a chosen man. He had dismissed them as prairie legends, until he saw the footprints, each one as large as a saddle leading straight into the barn. When he dismounted, the earth itself seemed to hum beneath his boots, and the air was thick with the scent of sage and storm. He hesitated at the door, fingers brushing the rough wood, and then he stepped inside. The light shifted instantly. It was cooler within, shadows stretching like living things, and there they stood, 3 colossal sisters, each radiating an aura of ancient power. Their hair flowed like black rivers, their skin gleamed with the bronze hue of the desert at dusk, and their eyes glowed faintly, as if each carried a star within. They did not speak at first, only watched him, their expressions somewhere between curiosity and command. Then the tallest one stepped forward, her voice echoing like thunder over distant hills. "You're going to be their husband," she said, not as a question, but as a decree from a time before memory. The chief felt his pulse quicken, his mind scrambling to understand. Marriage, to them. He had faced armies, not goddesses. Yet when the second sister smiled, something inside him faltered. The warmth of her gaze disarmed him more than any weapon ever could. The third moved closer, her massive hand resting near his shoulder, gentle yet powerful enough to crush stone. He realized then that he was not trapped, but chosen. Their presence was overwhelming, but not hostile. It was as though the earth itself had decided he was meant for this. Outside, the wind carried whispers of the old stories of unions that forged bloodlines between mortals and spirits, of warriors blessed by the mountains and bound to women who could command rivers. The barn creaked as if in approval, the scent of hay and destiny mingling into one. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then, slowly, the chief bowed his head, acknowledging what could not be denied. Perhaps his battles had led him here for a reason. Perhaps love, too, was a form of bravery. The sisters smiled, each one different, the eldest, solemn. The second, serene. The youngest, mischievous. As twilight deepened, he understood that this barn was no ordinary place, and these women no ordinary beings. He had stepped into a legend, and by dawn the legend would bear his name. Night fell over the ranch like a velvet shroud, heavy and watchful, the sky blooming with stars that glimmered like the eyes of ancient spirits. The Apache Chief stood outside the barn, his thoughts tangled between awe and disbelief, while the giant sisters moved within, their silhouettes swaying in the lantern light as though the barn itself had become a sacred temple. The wind carried a low hum, something primal and melodic, a vibration that seemed to echo from the earth's heart. He had agreed, though not allowed to remain till dawn, for something in their presence compelled him to stay. When he finally stepped back inside, the eldest sister waited by the fire pit in the center of the barn, flames rising high and casting a golden halo across her immense figure. "You were chosen by the ancestors," she said, her voice low, resonant, filled with the weight of eternity. "Our tribe was cursed when men forgot their promises. You are the one who must restore balance." The chief frowned, his fingers curling around the leather strap of his knife, not from aggression, but instinct. "Balance?" he asked, his voice steady but uncertain. The second sister knelt beside the fire, her massive hand reaching into the flames without flinching, pulling forth a glowing stone shaped like a heart. "This," she said, "is the oath stone. You will touch it, and the pact will bind your spirit to ours beneath the red moon tonight." He felt his pulse pounding, torn between duty and the unspoken pull of something larger than destiny. The youngest sister, whose laughter danced like the first rain of spring, stepped closer until her shadow enveloped him completely. "Don't be afraid," she whispered, her breath warm as a summer wind. "You were born for this." Outside, the moon was climbing, full and blood-red, casting its strange light through the cracks of the barn walls. The chief's memories flashed: battles won, comrades lost, his tribe fading beneath the weight of time, and in that moment, he realized that perhaps the universe had finally offered him redemption, not through war, but through unity. Slowly, he reached toward the glowing stone. The heat seared his palm, but he did not withdraw. The sisters began to chant, their voices intertwining like threads in a divine tapestry, the barn trembling under the power of their words. Sparks flew into the air, and the chief felt energy surged through him, his heartbeat aligned with theirs. His vision flooded with images of the mountains, rivers, and stars all converging into one living force. When the chanting stopped, silence filled the space, vast and eternal. The sisters looked upon him with new reverence. "It is done," said the eldest. "From this night, your fate is ours, and ours is yours." The chief gazed at his hand, now marked with faint glowing lines that pulsed softly like veins of fire beneath his skin. He felt no fear, only an overwhelming calm, as though he had stepped out of the mortal world into a story the sky had written long ago. Outside, coyotes sang to the moon, their cries echoing across the desert. The fire dimmed, and for the first time in many years, the chief smiled a quiet, knowing smile, as if accepting a truth he had always known deep down. Some battles are not fought with blades, but with the heart's surrender to the extraordinary. Dawn bled slowly over the horizon, painting the desert in pale gold and rose as the first light slipped through the cracks of the barn. The Apache Chief awoke on a bed of woven hay, his body still humming from the power that had bound him to the three sisters beneath the red moon. The fire from the night before had burned down to glowing embers, their faint heat whispering of vows made and destinies sealed. As he rose, his palm throbbed where the glowing lines had marked him, pulsing softly in rhythm with his heartbeat, a living reminder of the oath. The eldest sister stood near the open door, her immense form framed by the morning light, her gaze turned toward the distant hills. "The bond is sealed," she said quietly, "but a bond without understanding is fragile. Today you must face the trial of hearts." Her words carried the gravity of a mountain. The chief met her eyes and nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The second sister, gentle but inscrutable, approached with a bowl carved from stone, filled with water so clear it reflected the sky. "Look within," she said. When he peered into it, he did not see his reflection, but visions, moments of his life, replaying in flashes, the faces of enemies he had slain, the cries of the fallen, the barren lands his people had lost. Each memory struck like a blade. "Do you regret them?" asked the second sister softly. The chief's throat tightened. "I regret nothing done for survival," he said, "but I mourn what was lost." The youngest sister, smiling faintly, stepped closer. "Then you understand the first lesson, love, is not without pain. To heal others, you must first heal yourself." Her words stung, for they were truer than he wished to admit. The eldest sister gestured toward the barn doors. "Step outside and face what you carry within." When he emerged into the sunlight, the air shimmered and the world around him twisted. The open plains dissolved into a vast mirrored desert, stretching endlessly, reflecting sky and sand alike. From the mirage stepped 3 figures, warriors he had killed, their faces calm, their eyes shining with strange serenity. His breath caught. "You seek peace?" asked one, his voice echoing like thunder across the mirrored horizon. "Then forgive." The chief dropped to his knees, the weight of years pressing down. He whispered prayers in his native tongue, offering the only thing left. When he looked up, the figures had vanished, replaced by the 3 sisters, their faces radiant with pride. The eldest spoke again. "You have faced your own shadow." The bond deepens. The markings on his hand flared bright gold, pain lancing through him before fading into warmth. The sisters moved closer, their enormous figures casting long, graceful shadows that fell across his shoulders like wings. "You are no longer just a man," said the second sister. "You are the bridge between what was and what must be." The youngest reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his face with fingers that trembled with unexpected tenderness. "You have passed the first trial, but the journey has only begun." As the wind rose and carried the sound of distant drums, the chief felt something stir deep inside, no longer fear, but belonging. He gazed at the sisters, realizing that destiny had not imprisoned him and as the sun climbed higher, its light caught in the lines on his palm, glowing like a promise that the greatest battles were not of blood, but of the spirit and the heart that dared to love beyond reason. As twilight returned to the desert, painting the land in shades of crimson and violet, the Apache chief sat beside the 3 sisters at the edge of a canyon that seemed to stretch forever, its depths echoing with the sighs of wind and time. The day's trial had stripped him bare, yet something new pulsed within him, an awareness that his heart now beat in harmony with 3 others, a rhythm older than the stones beneath his feet. The eldest sister spoke first, her voice deep and measured like thunder before rain. "You have walked through your shadow, but to live with us, you must understand our sorrow." Her eyes turned toward the canyon, and as the chief followed her gaze, the air shimmered and twisted, revealing visions from their past. Long ago, the sisters had been guardians of the sacred plains giants, born of earth and sky, charged with protecting the tribes that lived in harmony below. But men grew greedy, cutting the trees, poisoning rivers, and turning on one another for land. When the sisters tried to intervene, they were betrayed by those they had once shielded. The curse that bound them to the barn was not punishment. It was grief turned into eternity. Our Father, the Spirit of the Mesa, declared that only the union of a mortal heart with ours could end our exile, said the second sister, her eyes glistening like stars. The chief listened, his pulse heavy with empathy. He thought of his people, scattered by war, and saw in their pain a reflection of the sisters' suffering. The youngest sister, ever the ember of hope, leaned closer, her immense frame trembling with emotion. When you touched the oath stone, you bound yourself to our redemption. But redemption requires sacrifice. Her words hung in the cooling air, fragile as ash. What must I give? He asked quietly. The eldest turned to him, her face unreadable. A heart cannot belong to one and to the world at once. You must choose freedom or love. The wind howled through the canyon, scattering loose sand like sparks. He stared into the abyss below, where shadows danced and light broke in shards along the stone. For the first time, the chief felt fear not of death, but of loss. Could he surrender the wandering life he had known for the uncharted devotion these sisters demanded? The second sister reached out, her massive hand brushing against his cheek, her touch surprisingly soft. Love is not a prison, Apache, she whispered. It is the courage to stay when you could run. The youngest smiled sadly. And courage has always been your gift. Silence fell among them as stars emerged, each one burning like an ember in the great dark sky. The chief closed his eyes, breathing deeply, letting the cool wind fill his lungs with the scent of juniper and dust. Then he spoke, his voice steady and low. If my heart can heal your sorrow, then let it be theirs. My freedom is nothing without purpose. The sisters exchanged glances, astonishment, gratitude, and awe flickering across their faces. The eldest bowed her head, a single tear the size of a river stone falling onto the sand, where it shimmered and turned to light. Then the second trial is complete, she said. Tonight the stars will remember your choice. And as the canyon winds rose around them, carrying the echoes of ancient drums, the chief felt the earth hum beneath him, again not with warning this time, but with blessing. The night wind howled through the plains as a storm gathered on the horizon, lightning flickering behind the black clouds like the breath of ancient gods awakening from their slumber. The Apache chief stood once again before the barn, the same place where his journey had begun, but everything within and around him had changed. The mark on his palm now glowed faintly even in the dark, pulsing in time with his heartbeat and the distant rumble of thunder. The three sisters stood behind him, towering silhouettes against the sky, their long hair whipping in the wind like banners of shadow and flame. The eldest spoke first, her voice cutting through the storm. The time of choice is upon us. The spirit of the mesa stirs. If your heart is true, he will come for you tonight. The chief turned toward her, his eyes calm though his soul trembled. And if it is not, he asked, then the bond will break, said the second sister, her tone soft as rain, and we will return to dust and memory. The youngest stepped closer, her eyes burning with a desperate tenderness. We believe in you, she whispered, her words trembling like a flame fighting the wind. Don't let our story end. The chief nodded silently. He understood that this was not only their trial, it was his. He stepped forward into the open plain as the first drops of rain began to fall, warm and heavy, carrying the scent of the storm. Thunder roared overhead, and from the heart of the clouds, a colossal figure began to take shape, the spirit of the mesa, the guardian of all that lived and all that had been lost. Its form was vast as a mountain, its eyes glowing with the molten fire of the earth. The chief dropped to one knee, his hand pressed against the wet soil. "Great Spirit," he called, his voice rising above the wind, "if I am to be the bridge between your daughters and this world, then judge me not by my blood, but by the truth within my heart." Lightning struck the ground before him, and the Spirit's voice thundered through the rain. "To bind the broken, you must burn away what is unworthy. Are you ready to be remade?" The chief closed his eyes, his pulse pounding. "I am." The storm erupted around him, flames of blue lightning dancing across the plain. The sisters cried out, their voices echoing in both fear and faith, as the Spirit's fire engulfed the chief entirely. For an endless moment, all was light-searing, pure, infinite. He saw every sin, every victory, every sorrow he had ever carried, stripped away like bark from an old tree, until only his soul remained bare, shining, and true. When the light faded, he stood transformed. The markings on his body now glowed with golden veins, connecting him to the earth beneath and the stars above. The Spirit's voice softened to a whisper. "You have walked through fire and become what you were always meant to be, the heart of the plains." The storm began to calm. The sisters approached, tears gleaming like pearls upon their giant faces. The eldest bent low and placed her palm over his chest. "He lives," she whispered, smiling through the rain. And as the clouds parted, revealing the first light of dawn, the chief realized the fire had not destroyed him, it had made him whole, a being not of two worlds, but one. When morning came, it did not rise quietly, it spilled over the plains like molten gold, washing away the storm's scars and bathing the land in radiant peace. The Apache Chief stood atop the ridge, overlooking the ranch, the barn behind him glistening in the new light, steam rising gently from its roof, as if the night's fire still breathed within its timbers. The sisters stood around him, their immense forms softened by the sun's warmth, their eyes no longer burdened by sorrow but shimmering with awe, reverence, and something deeper, love that transcended time. The air felt alive, humming with a low vibration, the pulse of a world reborn. The spirit of the mesa had vanished into the horizon, leaving only a faint trail of shimmering light that spiraled upward into the heavens. The chief looked down at his hands, the golden markings still glowing faintly beneath his skin, and felt a calm he had never known. "It's over," whispered the youngest sister, her voice trembling like the dawn breeze through canyon reeds. "No," said the eldest gently, "it has just begun." She turned toward him, her eyes deep as the desert night. "You have freed us not by conquest, but by courage. The curse is broken, and we may walk the earth as we once did." The chief nodded slowly, though a strange ache tugged at his chest. "And what of me?" he asked quietly. "You are one of us now," the second sister said softly. "Your heart beats with the plains, your blood carries the wind. You are both man and spirit." He turned his gaze toward the barn, where sunlight now poured through the open doors, illuminating the space where he had once stood as a stranger and found destiny waiting. He remembered the fear, the disbelief, the fire, and now felt only gratitude. The sisters stepped forward together, their hands enormous and warm, encircling him in a gentle embrace that felt like the world itself folding inwards. "Will the world understand?" he asked, his voice muffled against their touch. "It doesn't need to," the youngest said, smiling. "Legends are not meant to be understood. They are meant to be remembered." As they stood together, the wind began to rise again, swirling around them, lifting grains of sand that shimmered like gold dust in the sunlight. The earth beneath their feet pulsed once, a deep, resonant thrum, and then fell still, as if sealing their bond into the bones of the land forever. From that day, the people of the nearby town would whisper stories of strange lights in the canyon, of a man walking beside 3 giant women across the mesas, their laughter rolling through the night like distant thunder. The barn remained standing, untouched by time, its wood smooth and unweathered, as if the storm had never come. Seasons passed, and flowers began to grow where once there had been only dust. Coyotes sang beneath the moon, their cries not of mourning but of celebration, and the stars above seemed to burn a little brighter. In the heart of it all, the chief and the sisters lived as guardians, their love woven into every breeze that touched the prairie, every dawn that broke upon the horizon. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, travelers claimed they could hear faint music, 3 voices and 1 heartbeat carrying through the night, a song that spoke not of endings but of beginnings. For in the end, love had not chained them, it had freed the earth itself.